welcome to episode 2 of Tea and Tenacity. Today, our topic is the future of micro, small, medium-sized enterprising, financing, strengthening capital markets through a junior stock exchange. Today's discussion focuses on a topic that sits at the heart of business growth, sustainability, and economic inclusion. That is, financing for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises and what the future of capital market in Guyana could mean for them. For many small businesses, access to finance continue to be one of the greatest barriers to growth. Many entrepreneurs have the vision, the determination, and even the market opportunities, but often lack the capital needed to scale sustainably. At the same time, Guyana is entering a period where conversation around investment opportunities, capital market, and potential junior stock exchange are becoming more attractive and more relevant. This is not a new discussion for the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Over the years, under the leadership of former Presidents Timothy Tucker and Kester Hudson, the Chamber has consistently advocated for reform to Guyana's existing stock exchange and encourage conversation around the establishment of a junior stock exchange. The Chamber also began engaging and building relationship with the Jamaica Junior Stock Exchange as part of the understanding how this system can support small and growing businesses. But with opportunity must come understanding and preparation. What does this mean for small businesses? How do businesses prepare themselves? How can micro, small, medium-sized enterprises access these opportunities responsibly? And how do we ensure Guyanese businesses are not left behind as our financial landscape evolves? Today, we are joined by three gentlemen who each bring a very important perspective to this conversation. First, Mr. Gavin Ramsundar, Senior Vice President of the GCCI, who will speak to the Chamber's perspective and the importance of preparing micro, small, medium-sized enterprises for evolving financing opportunities. Secondly, we have Mr. Floyd Haynes, founder and chairman of New Haven Merchant Bank, who is involved in the development of the Junior Stock Exchange in Guyana and will share insight into the vision, structure, and opportunity it can create for businesses. And last but not least, Mr. Lance Hines, CEO of Brain Street Group and past president of the GCCI, who has been working on tools and systems aimed at helping businesses and individuals better understand and participate in capital market. So, gentlemen, welcome to Tea and Tenacity.
Thank you for having us.
Good. So let us begin. And I want to start off with our Senior Vice President, Gavin Ramsundar. Gavin, the GCCI has been advocating for stock exchange reform for some time. Discussion around a junior stock exchange have been taking place for the past 4 years at the GCCI, including engagement with Jamaica Junior Stock Exchange. From the Chamber's perspective, why has this been such an important conversation, particularly for micro, small, medium-sized enterprises?
Thank you, Madam President. If my memory serves correctly, it actually started longer than 4 years. It was perhaps back in 2018 under past President Timothy Tucker. And at the time, his notion or his stance was small businesses needed finance. We needed better access to financing and so forth. And of course, equity financing would have been a form of that. Listing companies listing your company to get a shareholding externally as well too. Our stand still remains the same, but it would require a cultural shift here in Guyana. We do not see many companies, as Floyd and I were just speaking about, getting listed on the stock exchange. They still either go for traditional debt or they don't go for financing at all. They believe that they can do it themselves. So our stance has remained the same, that we do need to look at this equity option. And of course, we would definitely welcome a junior stock exchange for that, to allow people to list their companies, one. And then now, if I can go into a different analysis of it, companies now are making more money. We've advocated for local content. Some of us are bearing the fruits of the local content. the riches of the local content. People are generally asking now, where do I put my money? They're at this mature level of their company's life cycle. So where do we put our money? Do we reinvest in our companies to solidify us and go on, or do we divest? Don't put all our eggs in one basket. And where do we divest into? Yes, we can go into real estate. But again, the familiarity of a stock exchange here in Guyana is not as strong as it is in the Western world, where as soon as a medium-sized person or a regular individual earns a little bit of a surplus cash, they would start trading. So we need that option here. We need that investment option as well too. And a rigid and a robust stock exchange would allow us to do so. Have day trading, as past President Lance Hines was saying. Of course, we would like dividends, but it goes beyond that. And I think with the implementation of a very robust stock exchange that trades every day, that has more than, as Floyd said, 17 options. Maybe you can have 30, 40 different options, and we can go there. Because the question comes up to me very often, Gatti. I have this X amount of money. Where can I invest in? Now, what do I tell somebody? As a Guyanese, it's difficult to invest internationally unless you have a wealth manager, right? It is possible, but it's difficult. But why not invest back here in Guyana? Why not invest in our country, in our local companies, and watch them grow by providing equity? We have a piece of the action, and we see what is going on here in our country. So the need for it is, I think now is the time for that. The GCCI will remain strong, with that stance, and definitely will continue to push that narrative.
You mentioned that lots of companies are still reluctant because we have a stock exchange, we have an existing stock exchange, to put their company there. I know when we talk about financial literacy, a lot of people think that is just for the micro, small, medium-sized enterprises. Is there an opportunity to ensure that is extended into large enterprise? To give them, because of course Guyana was built traditionally on family-owned businesses and so on. Is there an opportunity for us to extend those conversations to let them know it's all in the benefit of Guyanese?
Mm-hmm. When you spoke about the problem, you actually gave us the answer. It was financial literacy and exposure. With my little unofficial assessment of it, Kathy, I see that the larger companies, the more corporate entities, they are becoming more financially literate in terms of their education about these sophisticated stocks and so forth. And they want to trade. They do. And in some cases, they have. They are invested in the locally listed companies here on our Gasky. But I think the appetite, there's an appetite to do more. And they want to have more options, local companies to buy into. But that can only be done if there is a revampment. And Past President know what I'm talking about, and a more robust stock exchange, and hence the need and the call for the junior stock exchange. Because I think that, and I know there is an appetite for that. I know of many local companies, or a few I should say, that are invested internationally in the Western world. That money could have come and remained right here in Guyana and build these companies out. But for them to do that, there needs to be an incentive and education for the companies first to be listed. Then when that is listed, then we go to market. We're trading. Here's a good opportunity. Invest locally in Guyana. Invest in your own stock exchange. There's not going to be as much red tape as it is if you have to invest in, let's say, the USA or Canada and the Western world. It's easier to done. But, of course, the legislation needs to support that. But I think definitely now is, again, as I mentioned before, Kathy, now is the time to talk about it. The appetite is there. More corporate companies are becoming literate about this. That message needs to translate now into the SMEs. These are financing options, right? Not just real estate, not just gold. We could look at stocks. It's a big world out there. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head what's the value of the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. It's trillions. Yeah. That's the level of business that is happening out there. We're nowhere close to that. So to answer the question directly, it is being done. More can be done, but that message now needs to ultimately, as you mentioned, come down into the SMEs.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so the conversation is really important about preparing businesses for future opportunity. Floyd, you were involved in the build out of the vision for a junior stock exchange right here in Guyana. Help us understand what is the intention behind this initiative and how can it potentially support small businesses?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me apologize to everyone. I just had laser surgery. That's why I'm wearing the shades. It's not an attempt to be shady.
I thought it was the match.
No pun intended. So let me start. I don't know who the audience is, but I'm going to kind of give a little context about the stock market.
Market, if you may, I'm happy that you mentioned. I was going to mention after Lance would have give his remarks, but I can tell you we're in the room, so you know who you're talking to.
Okay.
Right, and our audience also do look forward to know who's in the room.
Okay.
We have Samantha Reed from Sao Investment, who have been a female-owned contractor. Have been doing really well in Guyana, helping to shape this country. So she has an interest in how she can invest or surplus. We have Masse here being represented. We have Every Data. IPEN have a few representatives in the house. Agents Inc. also is here, and we have Outliers Zone Caribbean. So these are all financial institutions that are in
great.
present.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start with the basic definition. When you think of a market, you think of a place where seekers and providers meet, or buyers and sellers, right? So a capital market is a place where people seeking capital, institutions or individuals, companies seeking capital, would meet institutions providing capital. It's just a marketplace for these two groups to meet. That capital market is powered by a stock exchange. So the President and the Minister of Finance has recently organized a team charged with developing and implementing a junior stock exchange. Why junior? We already have a stock exchange. When you think of stock exchange, it's a very highly complex and regulated type organization. A junior stock exchange is designed specifically for what is called a frontier and an emerging economy like Guyana, where you have smaller businesses seeking smaller types of investments. And so the regulatory framework is less stringent. If we were to use the regular framework for a developed stock exchange, then most small businesses would be locked out. And that's exactly what has happened. I think there's only 17 companies listed. And that is because the regulatory constraints are such that it exclude small businesses. So the President's vision is to have a junior stock exchange that could be more inclusive of the type of businesses we see in Guyana. Now, in businesses, there are two types of capital. If you think about it, there is debt capital, which most of us know as a loan. You go to the bank, you fill out an application, you apply for a loan, you wait for a decision, you get a loan. But there's also equity capital. Equity capital is where you sell your shares on an exchange in exchange for money. Investors will go on that exchange and they will buy shares in your company. So that's another way for you as a small business to raise money. The reason that's important in the context of Guyana is that most small and emerging businesses or startups aren't going to qualify for debt capital or for loan. For lack of a better, I'll just use the word loan. They don't have the balance sheet, meaning their financials aren't strong enough. They may not have had the track record because they're just getting started. And they may not have the collateral for debt. So then equity is a good avenue for them. To be able to exchange equity for cash, you need a stock exchange. It is the only mechanism whereby you can do that and still have control. Now, you can meet someone in the street and say, hey, listen, I want to sell you some shares in my company. But that is so informal and unregulated, the risks are huge. In an organized exchange, that is regulated by the Guyana Securities Councils and have the necessary oversight, you, the small business, you are protected. And you don't have to give up ownership in your company. You can you list your company in an exchange. Investors look at your company. Your listing will be backed up by a prospectus, which is essentially your business plan flushed out. Here is my vision for this company. An investor can look at it and go, I like this vision. I see where they're going. I want shares in this company. So that is the important, it couldn't be underscored more in an emerging, or what we're still a frontier economy. Equity capital, and hence a stock exchange where you can list shares, is probably more important. And it's the only, not the only, but it's one of the few vehicles that will include a broader swath of small businesses who are now trying to get their feet off the ground and are looking for startup capital, growth capital, capital to scale. You get to a certain point and you want to scale. Where do you get the capital from? You go to the bank and they say, you don't qualify. You don't have collateral. In some cases, the joke around town is you need to have as much money in your account in order to get the money you're trying to borrow. Right? So that's the loan model. The equity model doesn't require any of that. And that's the importance of a stock exchange.
Floyd, you talk about regulation. A scenario, family-owned business that was set up since 1970. Father has grew that business to a profitable state. Sons now want, when the junior stock exchange come on board, the sons want to put the business on the stock exchange. Probably you might say maybe about 25% or 30% of the business would be there for investment. But the father is concerned. He doesn't have an idea about this. How can we convince him to make it easier for the sons to put the business on the stock exchange? He would want to know, how would my money still be safe? What sort of regulations are there?
Well, the regulations are pretty rigorous, and it's sort of a double-edged sword because they're so rigorous that it prevents companies from listing, but at the same time it protects you. I think a big part of what we're going to have to do, and Gavin touched on this a little, is community outreach and education. Because essentially what has happened, you have this thing where you have a problem and then we had a solution. And then the problem changed, but the solution didn't change, right? And what I mean by that is this. Guyana is no longer, prior to the discovery of oil, Guyana was a very small economy. The ticket sizes or the investment sizes were very small, mostly mom and pop family businesses. But the country has changed. But the culture and the business environment has not caught up with that change. So I think to address that specifically, because I know that example in real life. We had a situation like that, but a year ago. I won't mention the name of the company. It's a well-known company, and that was the exact scenario. The dad wanted out, was getting up in age, and wanted to give it to the sons, and we were proposing a model where he could do that in a safe environment. And again, a junior stock exchange is the way to do that. And because you have, to list, you're going to have the approval of the Guyana Securities Council, perhaps the central bank. So you have the protection of the regulated bodies. But without the necessary education, businesses aren't going to feel comfortable because it's new. We're not used to operating like that. So part of what I am proposing with the president and the minister is we do an outreach where we go out to the community and explain and do an educational outreach so that people can understand what they're getting involved with, what are the risks, what are the upsides, what are the downsides.
And just for the audience to know, this is the second time Floyd and I are meeting in person, so the scenario that I mentioned and Floyd also mentioned has no correlation.
Yes. True, that's very true.
Because I don't want people to think Floyd is giving out information here, right? So education is important. Definitely education is important. Lance, we have been hearing some things that you have been creating some technology, you have been working on some areas where you can help to train businesses and individuals to navigate a future junior stock exchange, because of course that's something new to us, but for you, you have always been comfortable designing softwares and programs to make our lives easier. So talk to us about that, Lance. How is it that you can support what Floyd has mentioned to come in the future? Gavin talk about supporting the members of the chamber, and of course as a past president I know you have a vested interest in that, and also still a current member of the chamber. Tell us, how can our members benefit, how can they learn, what sort of education is there for them to understand?
All right, Chair. I'll start this by following up with what Floyd said with the story. I was at lunch with a friend of mine who family business, and I think they were told that they got to a point where the family was too large and they had to go public or something like that. So listening to him telling me the story about, the family struggling with this mightily, that too much family shares, so they got to go public. So I looked at it's a profitable company. So I looked at them and smiled and said, well, when are you going in the open market? The man said, you see, that's the very reason why we don't want to go. Because sharks like you, are hanging around the place to buy our shares. And I was trying to explain to him, I said, well, that's not necessarily the case. It's just that if you offer shares, you will be advised in terms of the amount of shares that you're going to offer to make sure that your control isn't delineated in any form. You maintain your shareholding. They go from there. But you could see that this was a hard conversation because they felt that they were giving something up and they were putting the company at risk. So it is just an idea of the kinds of things you run into in this society. I want to say to you that some of this is going to grow on its own and grow off on its own. As this economy grows, it's going to get more complex. The requirements are going to change, and in terms of getting financing, it's going to outgrow what the banks and them could offer, right? So you have to have that mechanism and the machine to be able to do this, which is the stock exchange. What I've always been interested in is the development of tools to be able to operate that stock exchange. We don't want to be manual. We're not going back to those old days and stuff like that. So the goal has always been to write the kinds of tools that could interface with the existing, for example, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and see how these tools could work in this environment. So you could stay in your house, for example, and be able to sit down and trade, trade in a stock machine. And it must also do two things, which is the core part of what we're doing. You and I have been talking, and one of the things that we have been discussing is actually setting up somewhere like this area as a room where we could install we can install a locally developed stock trading platform, and even do it elsewhere where people could actually go through the scenario, how stocks work, how you trade, what you're looking for financially in terms of the performance of the stock. So therefore looking at their financials is important, looking at their projections in terms of how they see themselves in the past 5 years. Look at the behavior of the stock at the moment, look at the interest. Those are the kind of things that we're going to have to put in, and those to be able to educate people. Education, especially in this environment, is going to be important. We are not familiar with this with this kind of environment where you're trading, whether you're a day trader or whether you're trading or whether you're an organizational trader in terms of how you manage your stock on your portfolio. Quite a few people have stock in this country. I mean, you could tell from the crowd of banks I age, they go there every year to collect their hampers and their things and stuff like that at the end of the day. But it is looked as a legacy thing where the son passes it on to the thing. And so you're proudly saying that you have stock from my grandfather. So, well, yeah, but here is a stock at the value of 180 with a par value of I think $1 or $2 or something at the point. And you don't understand the difference. Yeah. And not that is good or bad. I'm just saying as an example, if you own stock and if you own assets, you got to understand what you have, and you got to understand what you need to do with it for your own, for your own saving, for your own financial benefit. So critically, if we're going to bring this thing into this environment, if you're going to bring it, and I mean, it's not a matter of if you're bringing it, it's coming. It has to come. Mm-hmm. With the amount of money that's going to be here the amount of wealth creation and the amount of thing. What you do not want in an economy is the kind of liquidity where you can't put the money anywhere, right? That doesn't make sense. Nobody wants that. You make money by using it, right? So the idea is that once you put the tools, putting the tools is one thing, but those tools must be able to educate Guyanese in terms of how they could participate in this thing, and even some youngsters who are passive participate in these things, where if they got some money, put it in the stock market, watch it and see how it grows, right? And that's the kind of stuff that we would do here as part of the thing. We seed you $1 million on the exchange, and then we gauge how you spend that money over 6 months, or I think once, for you to begin to build the acumen, so you can learn to do when the time comes. And the real exchanges here, you know how to do it, you know how to use it, you know how to practice, and so on and so forth. There are issues, there are cultural issues and stuff like that. Probity in terms of your financing, Gavin, we could talk all day about that, about making sure that we have to get into the culture of reporting. We got to be able to get the filing and taxation and compliance, and all of those things now become critical things to do, because that is what is going to gauge your ability to operate in the stock market. You're not going to go there and sign up just like that, right? You're going to have to show the kind of probity, you're going to have to show the books, you're going to have to show the kind of credibility and integrity to be able to perform in the stock market, because people are buying, potentially, shares from you based on the information that you provide. So it has to be true, and it has to be clear.
Should people be afraid of this software, Lance? Because you would hear, even millennials are afraid of certain software on a cell phone. They don't know how to activate it, how to use it. The younger generation would have to guide them. Would it be something simple to learn?
I think so. And certainly as a provider, we have the obligation to make sure that this is not something that must look like rocket science, right? You must be able to go in there, buy stock, sell stock, get a return, understand what happens with the stock value when you do a transaction, how the value changes, whether the transaction goes ahead or not. There are certain rules and regulations and stuff like that. So an obligation that we will certainly have is to make sure that this is as painless as possible in terms of practicing in the stock market.
And I might add as well, the software, and Lance and I were having this discussion offline. So the software in and of itself is the tool, but it will sit behind a financial intermediary, which gives you that added protection. So it'll sit behind a Selfless Plug, New Haven Merchant Bank, or a Guy America, one of the financial intermediaries that provides that added protection.
So we got to get on board.
Right.
So before I continue, some questions for the gentlemen. We normally go to the audience. If you want to ask a question, just identify yourself, name and company that you're representing, and you can ask a question.
Javed Khan, Republic Bank. Let's say I'm a business owner and I go on the junior stock exchange. How safe is it for me to know that my company is not going to be taken over? I heard you mention it before, earlier while you were speaking, but I'm still not too comfortable with that. Like, with what you were saying, like you said, everything's going to be safe, but how is it safe? Do I lock in some shares, different classes of shares? How do you see that happening?
There's a part of it I can do, but maybe you can.
He's talking about the equity structure and the share classes,
right, yes.
not the majority.
So typically, when you list shares, when a company lists shares, it's a class of shares that are identified as shares for the public, but you still maintain a certain amount of shares that you control, that gives you controlling interest.
Right.
So for example, you can say, I'm going to list 20% of my shares for public consumption. I will retain 80%, or 30, I will retain 70. But that's the way you control it. You have a choice. You don't have to list all of your shares, because you're right. If you list all of your shares, you're gone. Everybody just buy it up. And then, you could have one person buy it up, and then that's a takeover. That's essentially a takeover, because the person just buy all of it and own your company. So again, all of these things don't happen in isolation. companies don't even list themselves. This would all be done in consultation. Another selfless plug, a shameless plug. But this will all be done in consultation with a financial intermediary. As far as I know, there's only a couple of institutions regulated and licensed to do that. And that's the two merchant banks. But those are where securities underwriter, broker, dealer license, all of those things. Those are the institutions that would be guiding you through that process. And making sure that you retain enough of your shares to have control. There are also classes of shares. You can issue non-voting shares.
I was just about to mention that. Class A, Class B.
Well, yeah, there are several ways to structure it so that you keep control.
Right. One other
It's a
question.
very good question, by the way. It's a very good question.
Just wanted to get that out here. The next thing, in terms of cost, if you're going to be listed on the exchange, you're going to have to have your financials audited. There'll be legal fees. I mean, for whatever reason, you have investor relation fees, things that you're going to be doing. You have to report to your investors. In terms of the education process from the business owners, right? I mean, is that something you think we're ready for? I mean, a lot of the business owners, SMEs,
Yeah.
not affair with these kind of things. And you know, if they're looking for financing on the exchange, when you consider all those costs, is it going to be a deterrent to them? How would we address this? You know? Sorry. Go ahead.
Sometimes I may have a project I can't come to you for, right? Because you're not structured to lend me the money. I may have a project that requires 5 rounds of financing, depending on completion. I can't come to you. You need me to start paying you back X amount of months for the time you do the money. I can't afford it, I'm under pressure, right? So therefore the option to be able to do that is something like a stock market where I put a prospectus out there, I do an initial public offering to see whether, folks will subscribe to it to be able to do that, right? So sometimes you can make an argument that yes, there is cost. There is, IPO cost. There's the whole preparation of your, which is what his company would do, for example, to get you ready for the stock exchange, and that's going to be a cost of that. But when you look at the cost that you have to that versus what your potential is, because what Floyd's company will tell you as well is whether you can make it or not, right? So there'll be a full analysis in terms of saying whether you could go. So if you decide you could go, well, therefore, bearing in mind, you take those costs in mind to go and do that. In terms of takeover, I'll tell you a story from many years ago. Barclays had sold their Republic Bank shares to Clico. Neil Massey as well, after that, sold to Clico. Clico tried, and this is where legislation comes into play. Because Clico, although they denied it, but Clico tried to take over Republic Bank in those years. And what happened was there was government legislation that said that when you get to a certain percentage, you are a potential danger to the rest of the shareholders. So at this point, is either you back off or you buy the entire company, right? And with Click, of course, you couldn't afford that, right? In terms of doing that, so you backed off. So it's a combination of what happens on the intermediary end for protection, but there is also enlightened legislation sometimes, especially in some parts of the Caribbean, that will say to you that, look, you could only go so far with this company unless you take other steps to protect the other investors. So it's a combination of things that would work in your favor as far as protect. I don't want to say protecting your interests, but make sure that the company doesn't get themselves into trouble.
And let me address your cost issue as well. So here's a way to think of it. Capital cost, right? Regardless of which route you go. So what's the alternative to listing? It's a loan. Well, there's a cost to that. It's called interest, right? So what you would have to do is do the analysis. If you go down this road, there's a series of costs associated with that. If you go down this other road, there's interest payment, by the way, which is guaranteed. You can't control any of that. Once you're locked in, you've got to make those interest payments monthly. On the listing, you have dividend payments, which to some extent can be controlled and moderated. So what I would do in every scenario, you kind of have to do the analysis and look at both options, right? But none of it is going to come without cost.
Right. One other question. Now, how are you going to convince the average Joe that it's better to invest 500 US dollars or $100,000 in the US exchange as opposed to Guyana's junior stock exchange? I mean, you can look up a small cap on the US exchange, and the amount of shares you can get there, and the return being in US dollars too. You know, the volatility as well, you may end up earning faster there. How do you see yourself getting this off the road, off the ground by convincing people, hey, it's better to invest here than the U.S. exchange?
Floyd said Floyd made a comment called frontier land.
Frontier land.
Yeah. And any economist would tell you that if you're really going to take chances in investing, you're better off doing it in frontier land than you do it in than you would do it in what would be a safe environment. What are you getting on returns now? 1%, 2%? Unless you're doing risky investment. You'll get. I am absolutely certain that if you look at the growth of this economy and the direction, you'll get more than that, right? Just because of where this economy is and where it's going, it hasn't gotten to that maturity where you could do it. So you're making money here. If you're really looking at, if it's return that you want, you can go safe and you could do it there. You could buy the stocks and you go through their volatility as well, because they have a certain gentleman there making decisions every day that, these days, it drop 500 points. The thing like that. So I mean, a lot of it is deciding how much your stomach can take. I mean, a group of us used to be in something called a German fund, and they had put telephone towers in Rwanda and in the Congo in the middle of the fighting. And that's how they made their money, because connection would still be made. We here sit down there drinking your coffee with a boil of nerves because you could lose all your money that you invested in a single day. But if you made your money, you made the money because the risk was so much that you got the kind of returns that you wanted. A lot of it is your belly.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, but it's very good though that we're having the conversation. I've been trading for about 15 years now. My sons are now doing it. But I think it's a good thing. I just don't know how fast you can get from where we are now to getting people to actually invest in this market here. Given the value of Guyana dollar compared to the US, and how long will it take for you to get a proper return, but you might have to invest a lot of millions, and that might be a risk that, a lot of people may not want to take. But because it's a new market as well for us here, legislation you're worried about, and things like that, which I know you all will cover. But nevertheless, I'm glad that the conversation is here and we're starting somewhere. So congrats. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? We can take one more question.
Javon from Massey. Just a quick one. I just want to also say, first and foremost, I'm also very happy we're having this conversation. It's a great start in terms of the Junior Stock Exchange. A quick question in terms of, for you, Lance, in terms of the tools. I can see a barrier being persons who do not have finance background, and to go on and to look at the financial statements, the balance sheet and stuff like that. From the tools perspective, would it go an extra mile, I should say, to really analyze like the health of the balance sheet and stuff like that, so that potential investors, they can really say, well, hey, I can make an informed decision here? Or is it that they would have to be linked to services, maybe brokerage, accounting and stuff like that, in order to make that informed decision? So in the beginning, would the tools consider that and go that extra mile? So
You're talking about ratios and so forth, and yeah.
Well, it is always good to get that primary advice, right? Go to Floyd, go to Gavin, get that stuff there. What we are trying to do, and we're experimenting with, is that we've wrapped AI around the toolkit. So what we have is like a training bot that you could go and ask questions and get responses right there and then. And if you're doing, and if you're getting assistance, and if it looks like you're struggling, you'll get something saying, well, look, what was the issue, what's going on and stuff. So for the sessions, the training, how to buy, how to sell, how to sell. We have put this tool in there, which we are experimenting with, to just give you tips and advice on the spot. There might have been something that you've forgotten in all the advice that you would have gotten. And the idea would be that we put this here, and you ask a question and get an answer for it. So so that's the kind of guidance that you would get. There's a part there where, and again, the experiment where if you sign up and you get seeded a virtual $1 million, Then there is a part there that could look at the health of your portfolio in terms of how you're investing. So AI might come back and rank you and say, well, listen, you're about 21st or 22nd on the list doing that. And maybe these are things that you could go back, look at your portfolio, make sure it is properly diversified, make sure your risk, your risk assessment is balanced and all those kind of things. So we are hoping that, again, get advice from the guys, from the professionals. But what we want to be able to do after you get that advice is to back that up with some with information that we would have on the platform.
And that's a role of wealth managers essentially. Like people who are not competent enough, non-financial persons per se, they go through wealth managers. They would say, okay, look, an opportunity came up to buy 10,000 US or 15,000 US. This is a stock. This is a little bit of historical knowledge. These are the rates of returns and so forth, right? So that's really the role of a wealth manager. If you don't have that financial competence to really know which stocks to invest in.
So Gavin, let me continue with you.
Yeah.
I want you to talk a little bit about what our members, because GCCI, we have close to 70% of our membership are micro, small, medium-sized enterprises. Of course, we have the large enterprises who have been doing well, but we want to ensure the small ones get to that level. So I want you to talk a little bit as to what they need to do to ensure that when Floyd and his team finish building out, that they are prime candidate if they want to get there, because of course Guyanese are making that money now financially due to the push up in the oil and gas sector. You have realized that we had to reclassify some of our membership who came on as micro, and when we look at what they've been doing, some of them have moved to medium size, right? But they didn't want to say it was because they don't want to pay the subscription. So we know they're making
Let's she say it, not the finance guy, right?
But right, so talk to us about that. What our members need to do to ensure they're okay. And the second thing I want you to touch on, it seemed like this junior stock exchange will bring out some new type of careers, so not just the business men and women would be benefiting. There are some professionals who can get there.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
and we spoke about that a little bit earlier, right? All right, so part A of the question, and that's where, organizations like the Chamber, they're here to support businesses, and particularly SMEs, as you mentioned, Madam President. 70% of our members are SMEs. We continue in every sense of the way to be a learning center, to be an engagement center, to be a networking center where we provide what we believe are value added. I like to use that word because I've incorporated it into the finance committee as well too. Value added in terms of understanding how to do business in Guyana, build your cases. Now we've had Leonard do a presentation. He's done a presentation for us. The reason he did it is to understand how important the credit score is. Those are important conversations we need to have. We've brought ACCA in the room, for example, to build financial literacy amongst non-financial managers. So a business owner can know how to read and incorporate an income statement, a balance sheet, a cash flow, how to interpret these documents. But it's about education. And coming back to our members, we will continue to do that. We will continue to provide courses to make these people business ready or trading ready, as we want to see it on a stock exchange. And if that is the direction that we know we have to go to build these companies, we are doing so. We've seen it in the Agriculture Committee. We've done some tests there where our agricultural head, Brian, he's worked with several hundred women-owned farmers, women farmers, female farmers, and small businesses to make them business ready. The importance of a compliance, the importance of a TIN registration, of NIS registration, and that's what this center, this is what it's built for, really, is education and providing that kind of literacy. We still have some ways to go, right? We need to understand the importance of having proper financial statements. I didn't want to interject when Lance was speaking, but the right financial statements. Guyanese got one for tax man and one for internal purposes. That needs to be one. Because it helps you to make the right financial. It helps you to make the right financial decisions. Because if you're a loss maker, you need to know that. What do I need to change? What formula or what blueprint do I need to adopt to become profitable? But the Chamber will always be there to support Madam President and to our members. We will always have these persons in the room. And if you're ready and serious about business, attend these seminars, come out. Everything that we have or most things that we've done rather in the last couple of years has been education. We had a session this morning, education again. It is about providing that avenue and that resource to our members who may not know how to do it.
The one point, Madam Chair, if I can, there is something very critical. You start a business, you grow it, you rear it, and you mind it from small. It's you own, right? Anything you are responsible for getting this the way it is. All of a sudden you need some money, right? And you want to get equity financing to do it. Some of that control you're going to lose. You got to give it up because you want to grow, you want to expand, and you want external financing to do it. And the bank doesn't make sense. So if you're going for equity financing, one of the things and it's always a hard sell, and it's a human thing because you've been with this thing since it's small, right? And you now want to get financing to take to the next step. All of a sudden, why you want with the board of directors? Why you want with the external auditor? Why you want, what's this? I've run in this thing for 25 years, and I bring it the way it is. Why I need all these things? And you're gonna have trouble because you don't like it. I'm telling you, human nature, you don't like it.
But that culture has to change.
But that culture has to change, right? It has to change when you're getting that, because when somebody comes in, if they put 10% or they put 15% of the thing, right? They want to hear at the end of the year, they want to see your quarterlies, right? They want to see the yearlies. They can bring the people to compare performance of the 2 years. What you're doing, why is there a dip? And you have to be able to explain that thing, which you're not accustomed to explaining to anybody, right? And that's a key cultural thing that we got to understand. If you go in there to get that financing, right, you're going to got to answer to somebody.
Yeah.
And we don't like it. We do not like it, but we have to begin to understand. Because you do it with, your loan officer doesn't get as detailed but the loan officer also wants to know how you're doing. You don't like how you're performing. But Mr. Equity Man is a different kettle of fish because he's looking for a return on his investment and on his investment. So therefore you're going to answer more questions. And it's just something that we're going to have to get accustomed to as business people, especially SMEs. Because the SMEs are close to the business. They're close. This is what I do it every day. And now you coming in and asking me all kind of funny questions about my work and so those are the kind of cultural things that we got to work on to make sure that we're ready for this thing.
Floyd, sorry, one thing, Madam President. He mentioned about change, but the reporting requirements for listed entities are different from a regular entity. Floyd would know that. It's more detailed, and we have to get accustomed to that. There needs to be more transparency. It's a different set of statutory requirements.
Yeah.
Sorry, Madam.
I have a question for Floyd, but before Floyd go, Lance mentioned something. Well, the conversation just now that you put out. But then, though, Lance, there is some confidence in accessibility because I always hear the Americans would say, we can stay at home and make money.
Yeah.
We can trade online. Tell Guyanese a little bit about that confidence in accessibility.
That has to grow. We still have strange relationships with the ATM. We still want to go in the bank for you and collect the money. See this business of transferring money and so on. We get in there, but we ain't thing. America's gotten to a stage where certain things are automatic. The light goes on, the water runs, I could go to the ATM and get my money. Right? Or I know that if I'm going to get paid, it's going to be sent. That is improving rapidly here with the amount of technology that's being used. I mean, there are more transfers to the accounts and so on and so forth. Right? But generally, a man want to go to the desk, I want to pick up, if he pick up a check, he goes straight to the bank to cash it. Long lines in the foyer. The bank don't want all those long lines and they get vexed with the bank and all those kinds of things. So, again, all of that are things that we got to do. The confidence in the system, the confidence in the machine, the confidence to believe in the information that is given to you, right? All that trustworthiness, all of that are things that are going to have to be worked on as we get into this kind of environment. There's a lot of work to do, but it has to happen.
Floyd, as you are building out, I know you have figured out that there would be some risk. Let us talk about that. I have been hearing the good things. Let us talk about the risk. Javid mentioned the risk.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, there's going to be some downside and some risks. Um, so, so some of the risks involve, I always prefer to think in terms of trade offs, right? There's going to be some upside, but what am I giving up? I think Lance mentioned a big part of it is the extra scrutiny that comes with it, the openness and the transparency that you're going to have to be able to provide. There is also a risk for the investor, right? And the most glaring of all is that you invest in the company and it doesn't work, it goes belly up. That's the real risk of investing in stock. Whereas if I loan you the money, well, if you loan the money and the company goes belly up, you still don't get it back anyway, right? But you have some rights and some claims. As an investor in the stock market, that is the primary risk, is that you invest in a company, it's badly managed, the company goes under, you lose everything. There is no recourse. That is the most glaring risk. And that is why I think the educational process is going to be helpful, because people have to know this. The other risk, and I've been saying this a lot to everybody I meet, the other risk to Guyanese is that currently the stock exchange is not very interactive, right? The current stock exchange, and we shouldn't duplicate that. In other words, you've got to get to the point where you can settle transactions within 24 hours or even in real time. What I mean by that is this. If I bought Apple or Meta on the New York Stock Exchange and I invest my money, heaven forbid I have an emergency tomorrow, I can sell and get my money back. The risk here is that if we don't get it together, right now there's a 2-week, I think, in order to settle a transaction. That's not going to work. Because again, we're a growing economy. Guyanese, we have stuff come up all the time that we don't think about. We invest in this company, an emergency comes up, I need that money. I can't sell and get that money right away. So those are some of the risks I see in going the route of equity. You can't get that money back. You have to wait until it's sold and settled, right? So, and then you have to also, there's so many pieces to it, and then I'll end here. But you also have to make sure that the market is big enough and large enough that there are buyers and sellers, because they may not be a buyer for the security you're selling. So what if if the market is very small and you need your money and all you have is a security, but you need that money to address whatever emergency you're having, and there isn't a buyer for it. So these are all, I think, risks that you would encounter. So,
good. Gentlemen, closing remarks. Can start with Gavin. And you can still give me, just in case somebody's looking and saying, business is not my cup of tea, but I'm comfortable being a professional and I don't mind going into something new. Probably give me one or two of those new professionals or new areas that might pop up as a result of having a stock exchange.
Well, I didn't answer the question, right? So you circle it back to me. I think for young professionals, look, Ghana is rapidly evolving. When we started to do accounting and finance 20 years ago, it's different. It's completely different. I mean, it's not completely different, but there are improvements that we need to make. And that is as a result of, oil and gas, that frontier coming on board. This is going to be a new frontier. And I think for me, I welcomed that challenge because I had, financial skills, but I needed to develop a different set of skills. And overall, it made me, a better professional. If this, when this is introduced to the Guyanese people, it forces us now to educate ourselves. And as a young professional, that is a challenge that I welcome. Education in financing, in stocks and so forth. It's a different paradigm. It's a different type of academic content that is required. So for me, I welcome it. And what it does, it gives people more career options. That is a big deal. We've gone from being just a bookkeeper, just a guy looking at financials. I know when Javon and I had this conversation, I said I didn't just want to be a finance guy. I wanted to be a business guy. I want to be an entrepreneur guy. I wanted to develop a different set of skills. This now is another challenge for me as a young professional that I would like to take on. And of course, it builds more young professionals out there. What we would need are good educational institutions that would provide the qualification and the programs, and the programs that would be applicable to trading in stocks.
iPad is an opportunity in every data. Floyd, closing remarks.
So what I would suggest to both sides of the equation, the buyer and the seller, the investor and the investee, is this. If you're a company and you're doing really well, like Lance says, it's your baby, you have one of two options. You can sort of bury your talent, referring to the parable of talents. You bury your talent and you sit on it because it's yours, you want to keep it, and you're proud that you have it. Or you can grow your talent. And in order to do that, you have to be open to investment and bringing in expertise and scaling that business. And one way to scale that business will be through a junior stock exchange. Of course, it has to be compared to other alternatives. So what I'm asking for the SMEs is to be open and to think about it and certainly consider equity capital as a form of growing your talent and scaling your business. On the other side, Guyana is growing by leaps and bounds, and a lot of people are going to have disposable income that they didn't have before. Yeah. The question is, what do you do with that little extra $50, whatever the number is? And I'm saying start looking at Guyanese businesses. Wouldn't it be great to say that you have been part of the transformation and development of the Guyana?
Building.
Well, that's how you become part of it. Is by investing. Charity begins at home.
Yep.
Of course, the gentleman raised a good point. We now have to make sure that what we're offering is sufficiently competitive, right? It just can't be a patriotic thing. It has to make financial sense.
Yep.
So my advice is to approach it with an open mind, and then we have to go out and do the community outreach and educate people about it.
Yeah.
Lance.
This is here. This is not an option in terms of, if you want, you could do this or you could do that and stuff like that. The economy is evolving quickly. So we're a pooch punch society sometimes. We kitty cat a TikTok here and so on and so forth. You're not going to be allowed to do that in an evolving economy, and that's just the way it is. So you're going to have to figure out a way how to grow. You're going to have to figure out a way how you're going to compete. You may be making billions of dollars now, and when this economy changes, depending on what the requirements are, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So they're going to have to be creative ways to find money, to raise money, right? You can choose to go to the bank if you want to still, but you must have, it is good to have the other options around.
Yeah.
And this is an industry that I could tell you, it could spin off an entire ecosystem. You got investment advisors, you got things, as Javed was saying a few minutes ago, the basic auditor now could evolve into a financial advisor, right? Financial planner, doing a stock analyst, doing stock evaluations and stuff like that. There's a whole range of expertise. If this grows the way that you and I and others would like to see, you could do it. So the potential is there, and the SMEs now go and grab it. And as much as possible, the chamber and others will make sure that as much information, as much orientation, work on the culture changes and all of that information is going to be made available. Please take advantage of it, because these are going to be different times very soon.
Excellent, thank you. So the conversation around a junior stock exchange are not simply about investing. They're about creating broad access to capital, encouraging stronger business practices, increasing financial literacy, as was mentioned here, and preparing Guyanese businesses for long-term sustainability. And Lance talk about that through the training. As a chamber, we will continue to support our micro, small, medium-sized enterprises to ensure that the new benefit of financial sustainability, being financially robust, is taken care of, right? And that happens to be what we have been calling for a junior stock exchange. This is not our final episode for the month, I think at the no, we might push it over into June. But the next episode in June, we are talking to 3 BSOs head. I would not give names, but just for you to know, one from the mining tongue. If you don't know the mining tongue, you're not a Guyanese. One from the beautiful county that has the breeze of the Quarantine River. If you don't know that, you're not a Guyanese. And one that represents the women and not Cathy Smith, right? I would be the moderator. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Happy to be here.
Thank you, Madam President.
It's always good to hear the Chamber's perspective on this, and Gavin, our Senior Vice President, have been doing an excellent job there. I thought it was me over in the chair, Gavin. So well done there.
Thank you.
Floyd, we're looking forward to this. I know the government has the interest of Guyanese when they talk about the Junior Stock Exchange, and we know it will come to ensure that Guyanese continue to benefit. And as we leave or make generational wealth and leave it, it would not be in a way, as Lance said, I collect something from my grandfather. It would be a very sustainable something.
Absolutely.
And we know Lance always create those software to make things easy for us. And I know all of us, including myself, who is technologically, I don't want to say,
In between,
right? I am still in between with technology, but I've seen a few of Lance's software during the COVID time. There was some software, some stuff there had you cracking up, laughing, and so on. So we don't expect anything better. We're looking forward to working with Lance in this same center to support our small, medium, micro size enterprises. Audience, you have been well. Thank you so much. I was hoping for some more questions, but you know what that means? That the teachers were excellent. So thank you. And this was Tea and Tenacity, hosted by the GCCI.